Hello everyone, welcome to Armageddon War, release week. Yay! Folks have been getting their copy of the game in the mail. I got mine 2 days ago. It should be hitting out to everyone globally pretty soon. Keep checking your mail. Well, hopefully you check your mail every day, but hopefully it shows up for you. So what I want to do is figure out how to eliminate the glare on the counters. That's first, which I guess won't happen. But I want to talk about some of the gameplay mechanics. That way, as you're getting your game and you're reading through the rules, hopefully we can clarify some common things that come up. All right, so let's start by picking a scenario and setting up. There are 15 scenarios at the back of the book. Scenario 1 is a great place to start because it gives you just a few units, a handful of units, a couple of formations to activate, and it's a great introduction to the rules. It even tells you as you progress through your scenarios what new concepts are being introduced. This first mission pretty much is going to require reading up through the basic rules all the way to the advanced page. Now I'm going to take and move this for a second. And the advanced rules start on page 20. Right there, advanced rules. Advanced rules will cover some of the indirect fire, offboard artillery, rockets, limited munitions, potential air units, minefields, things that you might expect for advanced rules. The basic rules cover movement, firing, combat, opportunity fire, the retreat system, the counterfire system, things of that nature which you really need. Even close combat or melee or close assault in other games. If you just read the first pages up to page 20, that's going to give you enough to play the game just fine. And then you can add in the advanced stuff as you go through the scenarios. Now your typical setup will tell you exactly what factions are involved. I say factions, but like nations, whatever you want to call them. It will tell you how many units are involved and the points cost. That's because on page 28, this gives you a pretty good example of how to build scenarios with your point cost. And they're all right here. That way, if you do want to make your own units, you can. This is interesting. Israeli ISIL units, they have their own inway. That's like the Zarahawi, just off of memory. Someone did point out, they said that the Russians had something that looked like, I guess we put Apaches on Russian unit card. So I was looking here, Russian units. I don't see Apache, so I'll have to look and see if that's actually a thing. But anyway, so follow these scenarios and they'll introduce you to more complex situations as you advance. So let's take a look at our board and see how we put this in motion. The way we track, I don't even think you need to call them turns, but the way we track activation segments is this impulse board, which is on the side of the Armageddon map. It goes from 1 through 9, which is off the map here. And as you hit 10, we have a little marker to help you track if you hit turn 11, 12. When you hit 20, put it on the 20, then you go to 21, 22. There's no actual end of turn segment or beginning of a turn. There's some administrative work that you do as the impulses progress, but the game is just a continuous cycle of activations. So there's no I do stuff, my opponent does stuff, and then we do some kind of administrative counter phase and things like that, and then we start a new turn. The idea was to keep the action like a continuous flow of action. That once the battle starts, these folks are, constantly moving and maneuvering and trying to get at each other. So that's the concept there. How does that work? Well, you're going to have your opaque cup. That's my opaque cup, don't judge. And you put in, according to the scenario, the organization chits that you're going to need for activating. You put them in the cup or clear plastic bag, draw one, and that's the unit that's going to go first. So we drew Salette. That means all units that are part of the Salette formation we get to activate. So we'll go take a look at our map and see what my Salette units want to do. So I'm going to put that on impulse 1. According to our scenario setup rules, I actually have several ISIL units that are coming in from the north. They're coming in on hexes AA1, Y1, and W1. You're given 4 trucks, 4 militia infantry, and 2 BMP-3s. The idea is to race them south, western, into the cities protected by the militia units so you can steal supplies from the cities that they're guarding. Stacking allows you to put up to 2 units in a hex. Infantry inside of a BMP count as 1 unit. Even though there's 2, they're inside the vehicle. So I can put a BMP in a truck, or I could have infantry in a truck. I think for this setup that I did, I lied. I have 1 truck here with infantry. That truck has infantry. These 2 trucks have no infantry, but both of my BMPs are carrying infantry. So they can race up there. When I say race, I probably should have put all the infantry in trucks. The trucks are much faster, but this will let my troops ride in style in the back of a BMP. So when they get activated, they have a couple of choices. They can move, they can shoot. Now, what's really cool is the moving and shooting segment is a dice modifier. And you have to decide, am I shooting and then moving, or am I moving and then shooting? How far you move determines how much of a penalty you get on shooting. And what's nice is there's 3 penalties you can get. If you move up to half of your movement, that's a -1 on your die quality. If you move up to, or from half to 1 below full speed. So for example here, this BMP has a movement of 6. So if I move up to 3, which is half, then I would get a -1 die quality penalty. If I move 4 or 5, I get a -2. And if I move full speed, I get -3 on my dice quality. That could be detrimental depending on how close you get to a target after you get done driving at full speed. Oh, my goodness. Now there's dice. You mentioned dice quality modifiers. Well, you're all very intelligent gamers, so let's explain dice and then do a sample movement, and possibly, just maybe, somebody might get to shoot at some point. So let's talk about dice for a second. Armageddon War uses a custom dice pool system to conduct and wage combat. When you go to make an attack, you start with the default black dice. And from your default black dice that you might get to roll, you either get positive dice quality modifiers or negative quality dice roll modifiers. After you've determined all the dice quality modifiers, you then modify these dice here. So for example, if I had a negative dice quality modifier, such as for moving, I would replace as many dice as are being lowered in quality. So if I had, let's say, just moving, up to half speed, so I get a -1 dice quality modifier, I could pull the black die out and replace it with a green. And then that's what I would roll with. Let's say I moved that half, or from half up to full, then that's a -2 dice quality. I would replace both black dice and they would both be green. Let's say I had -3 because I did full speed movement and I have to drop 3 dice in quality. That's it. You can't go below green. And you don't have to subtract dice. You just are going to stay at your green. One thing that was kind of recommended, which I think when you're first starting out, I think it's actually easier to modify your dice as you apply modifiers. More experienced folks, what they'll do is they'll get a grand total number of negative or positive and then modify the dice. Like, so for example, if you did movement, but you're at close range, so you would subtract maybe 2 dice quality for movement, but you add 2 quality because you got to close range, or 1 for close range, or maybe it's two for close range. Those modifiers cancel each other out, so you wouldn't need to change your dice. But as you get to like start learning the game, for teaching my son, we just applied the modifiers as we saw them to make sure we got them. So if we had -1 for movement and then +2 for close range, that would bring this one back up to a black. That's one positive step. And then black to red was our second positive step. So it's going to be up to you what's best for learning how to modify your dice, but that's the basics. A couple key concepts here also. There's not many ways to add dice to your pool. So let's say you start with 3 dice. The way you determine that is you subtract your attack score from the defender's defense. Then you can modify how many dice you get. There's a couple ways. One of them is add additional firers. So let's say I have, this was an infantry shooting at a truck, so it has 3 attack, and then I add +1 for each additional firing unit. So let's say I had 2 additional infantry, that would give me 5 dice. There's flanking fire bonus, and you know, if you look through the book, there's one or two more that are escaping me off my memory, but they're in the book. So, but what I'm saying is there's not many ways to add dice, but there's quite a few ways to modify the quality. So let's say I'm going to end up with 5 dice I'm shooting at somebody. Well, if my opponent is in cover, and the terrain chart will say there's a -1 dice quality, well, subtract, there you go. My cover is being affected, my dice quality is being affected by the opponent being in cover. Let's say my opponent wishes to retreat, and off the top of my head, I think that gives us -1. Might give 2. I don't have the chart, I'm not looking at the chart, so I'm just going off memory. But then I could apply another -2 here. But let's say all that's happening at close range. So I get to add 2 to my dice quality. Well, that means I got to bump up these 2 back to black. So what helps govern this is, 1, you can never have more than 6 dice of any color. Like if you're rolling, you get to roll a maximum of 6 dice regardless of colors. The other thing too is you can only have 2 colors showing on your dice at any one time. So as you add and subtract quality modifiers, you can't say, hey, here's my dice, here's -1 for terrain, but I get to add 2 for close range for quality. I can't just take those, upgrade those to red while I still have a green. I have to move the green die through the steps first. So I would have to go 1 step to bring it back to black, and then 1 step to bring that to red. All right, so those are just a few rules for dice. Like I said, once we start demonstrating, I'll get the chart out and I'll give you more accurate numbers to use. But hopefully that gives you an idea of the dice. And just for you, decided to pull the chart out, read the chart, so you can add dice, because it said +1 dice number. It's got here combined fire, flanking fire, and there still might be the occasional odd rules reference in advanced rules or something that adds on. I really think there was one more, and I can't think of it right now, but flanking fire and combined fire are probably the 2 most common. But remember, you can only add up to 3 additional dice to your original dice pool that you're rolling, and you're still going to be at a maximum of 6 dice, and you should only ever have 2 colors. All right, dice we've got. We've got the terrain chart. Now we get to talk about moving stuff. Right now, nobody's in range to shoot. Oh, how do I know that I'm not in range to shoot? My goodness, there's so much and I haven't even done anything. So let's take a look at the stats for this truck. You have a firepower, a movement, the W stands for wheeled, there's also I for infantry, and T for track. Then you have the defense. This is a technology level. There are 3 technology levels. There's green for the lowest technology, black I'm going to say is the average technology, and red is high technology stuff like fancy T-14 Armada or something. And that will also give a modifier to dice. Normally in subtracting dice, not so much adding, but you could. We'll talk about how that explains, or explain how that works when we get there. Now my movement for this truck is green. Green movement means they can carry infantry. So I could put people on the back of this truck and go for a drive. Otherwise I have 10 movement as a wheeled vehicle over the terrain. I'm going to stick this back in the pile, which was here, and grab a BMP. BMP also has firepower, has 6 movement points and the T for track, and it has a defense. This actually has a defense value of 1, and it has the lowest technology level. Then we have infantry. Technology level is also green. 1 red shield, firepower, and movement of 3 with an I. This little sub number is a 1. That's how far the weapon or infantry can effectively shoot in hexes. The BMP, on the other hand, can shoot up to 4. Now, when it comes to weapons, some of the weapons will have specific modifiers, like they might have a circled number. That would indicate like that it's a fixed distance. They don't get a bonus for short range or extended range. When the number is white like this, you get a bonus for close range firing. You get no penalties or bonuses out to the number listed, and then you get long range penalty for shooting up to twice this distance. So the BMP does a pretty good job shooting out to a maximum of 8 hexes to engage infantry. Infantry, on the other hand, with a range of 1, will be outgunned by the BMP. So one strategy is to always keep your opponent at distance, because when you combat, the enemy could shoot back if you get too close. So let's stick them back in the stack. Oh, why the different colors of shields? Okay, we haven't got to combat yet, but just to let you know, the shield colors represent what type of combat they can do and what defense they have. So red on a yellow burst indicates that these excel against infantry. Infantry have a red shield. The primary number is red. The burst underneath indicates secondary effects against other target types. So for example, a yellow burst means they have the potential to damage armored vehicles, but they're not very good at it. So a BMP is really good at shooting infantry, but its autocannon isn't very good against other armored vehicles. It can cause damage, it's just not as good as, say, a tank, which is designed to shoot armored vehicles. But we'll take a look more at shields and bursts when we do some combat examples. We're still trying to move troops. Now we can move troops. This is really not any different at this point from any other war game ever. You look at the terrain, you cross-reference the terrain type with your chart, and it's going to say to you how far you can move. So for example, in a clear open hex of sand, infantry move at a cost of 1 hex for 1 movement point. Wheeled vehicles move at a cost of 2 movement points to 1 hex. And tracked are back down to 1. So apparently wheeled vehicles don't like sand. I have trucks. So if I was going to move in the open, it's going to cost 2 movement points. So 2, 4, 6, 8. I could spend 8 movement points and get right up here. Okay, 8. Oh, well, how do I know who can move? I got a whole bunch of units. Well, remember, when you activate a formation, it's every vehicle attached to that formation, and these trucks are attached to the Salette formation. Also, all these units are marked with Salette, which, of course, according to the glare, you can't see the word, but I moved this truck. So what you do is you've now got these steps that you can apply. I'm going to rotate all these so these are facing the right direction for me. I was sitting at the other side of the table, and then I moved over here. Now I got to rotate so I can read everything. Every time an action, a unit does something, you want to mark it as having done an action. So this means they have -1 firepower if they attempt to do counterfire or close combat. because they've done an action, they cannot fire, op fire, or move. Basically, it's almost like if you think of like 65 or Knight of Man, when a unit does a firing, you would put like a fired counter or a moved counter. This is just an action counter. So that indicates to me this unit has driven and they're done. And if I'm looking to see what units I could now do another activation, I would have to look at stuff that don't have the little tab. Oh, and that's why these are kind of shaped weird, is that way when I stick them under the counter that's acted, I have a quick reminder of who's activated, and when they do combat, a quick reminder of what penalties they have in combat. Just a quick visual indicator. I can move 6. Remember, tracked vehicles can move up to 6 on sand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm gonna move here with my BMP. No, better yet. 1, 2, 3, 4. What I should have done in setup was put all my infantry on trucks and just left my BMPs for combat. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and go 1, 2, 3, 4. And that way I can start shooting at units in town. Of course, I'm pointing off map. You can't see where I'm going. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to move that. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the infantry on the vehicle move. They would also be marked. Infantry, there's some rules with that. If they're in the vehicle, they get marked at one level lower than the vehicle. Mostly that's for damage purposes. So there's a chance that if the vehicle blows up exactly, the infantry would automatically dismount, but they would be at the highest penalty of -3. Now, we can talk about infantry disembarking and things like that. Basically, at half movement points rounded down. So the vehicle, my BMP could move 3 hexes, deploy troops. The troops would come out and they would have spent half their movement rounded down, which they have 3 movement, by the way. So they would lose 1 movement point for disembarking from the BMP, and then they could actually deploy up to a hex away, and they just have to pay the cost of the hex to move in. But we'll show that when we want to unload troops. I still have a bunch of stuff to move. Let's see. So I got a truck. I'm going to bring another truck up. Mostly I'm going to put the trucks up here because they can't fight. What they're going to do is wait for my troops to push the city so they can go in and start stealing stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to put a truck right there. And I put the minus. Then we're going to move my BMP. Again, we want to move up so we can start shooting and then maybe drop off some troops. Well, I tell you what. I should probably, like I said, I'm going to put stuff on the truck. So let's go this way. 1, 2, 3. I moved half my movement with the BMP. My infantry get out. And you can, and I don't want to get too complicated on you right now, you can deploy troops into the same hex as the BMP or into one adjacent hex. This is important because you cannot violate overstacking at any time. So if I already had, say, 2 BMPs, both with troops, and I want to deploy troops, I could not deploy the militia into that hex because it already had 2 BMPs. That's why I could deploy adjacent. It would just be 1 extra movement point to move into clear. So what I'm going to do, move the BMP 3, that's half his movement, he's now done. I drop the infantry adjacent into the same hex as the truck, because that's only 2 units in that stack, and that also cost this militia another movement point. I could theoretically move the militia 1 more, but I think I'm going to stick them in the truck. Yeah. Now, I can't put them in the truck right now because you can't load and unload in the same turn, but they're now in the same hex as the trucks. So I'm going to leave this -1 to remind me that that whole stack has done something. And then I'm going to mark him as having done something. I know I should have loaded up these guys onto the trucks ahead of time. I'm just demonstrating. Don't judge. All right, here comes a truck. This truck has infantry. we might want to drop them on, I don't know, we might want to drop them into an overlook position. 1, 2, well remember, it takes 2 movement points to move a truck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could move here for 5 movement points, but I wouldn't be able to drop off my infantry. Well, I could drop them here, but I couldn't drop them off on this hilltop to start shooting down. So there's actually a maneuver vehicles can do called flanking move. So the idea is that vehicles move at the printed value. That's so they can take advantage of terrain. You know, they're like safely moving from sand dune to sand dune. But when you flank move, it means you get to reduce the terrain cost by 1 movement point, and you can't go less than half a movement point. So if I was flanking on roads, I'd be moving at like half a movement point along roads. That means I could travel really far, like 20 hexes on a truck. But if that truck was shot at, it would actually get die quality modifiers for the attacker, because if you're driving at full speed, that means you're not taking advantage of terrain. So this truck, because nothing can shoot at it, is going to do flank speed up to this dune and drop off troops. So let's just shift the camera so you can see that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, guess what? I did flank speed. That still only gets me there. Come on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, well, flank speed gets me there, because normally it would otherwise be 2 movement points, 4 movement points. Because remember, it's 2 points normally. So flank speed lets me move up here. Yeah, I'll deploy a troop here. So I move my truck up, drop off a soldier. Both of those now get marked green. So I pick my counter up, boom. Pick this counter up, boom. And I got 1 more truck. They're gonna do the same thing. So we drive up here to 5 away. That's half my movement point, and they deploy the militia up to 1 adjacent hex. So now, 2 units, no stacking violations, and now I've got troops ready to come up here and start shooting down on people. I've got a BMP in position to start shooting the city defenders. What are the city defenders gonna do? Well, it depends on who we draw next for activation. All right, here comes my opaque cup. I shuffle around and draw rebels. Nice. I put that on the second impulse. Let's see what rebels are going to do. So the rebels have a technical truck, just basically a truck with a machine gun on the back of it. There's an infantry with an infantry portable Sagger missile. Another infantry in the city, another infantry. I could move the infantry up and double stack, but I found that in this scenario, the rebels do a lot of retreating to try and do, like, I guess you might call that like a delaying actions. The ISIL troops are pretty much going to move south. It's just a matter of how effectively they can move south. So I'm going to leave my troops where they are. This troop here has an RPG, and that's important to know because I might get to do opportunity fire if something moves close. Well, let's see what we can do. So I have a machine gun, nothing in line of sight. This point here cuts across. I think that cuts across. Let me go get my laser pointer. Well, when we shoot, we have to check range and line of sight. This infantry here has a range of 1. He's not hitting anything. My RPG has a range of 2, but extended range out to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, they're in range of the RPG. Oops, I should have maybe stayed back 1 more hex. I didn't count very well. So this is going to be extended range for the RPG. Normally you could add your offense to the base offense here if this was in range and could actually do anything. But as it stands, the rebel militia are by themselves, like they're just not in range at all. But the RPG is. So let's just make sure. Oh yeah, I was checking something else first, wasn't I? I was doing the machine gun truck. Yeah, that's totally clear. The machine gun truck, however, my hands are in the way, aren't they? Can't even see the hex. Where were we? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is my finger there? Let me shift the camera a little bit. All right. So from the hex the truck is in here to the center point, it misses this dune. So the machine gun could shoot here as well. Let's put these back. Unfortunately, the machine gun really it would not do much damage, if any, to the BMP with that machine gun. And we'll discuss why. Well, let's talk about it right now. So the first thing you do is you take your firepower, you subtract the defense of your opponent, which, let me shift the camera ever so slightly. There you go. I have a defense of 1. So firepower 2, defense of 1. That means I would be starting my attack with 1 dice. Then for long range, because it's a printed value of 2, extended range is out to 4 hexes. Long range is a -2 dice modifier. So a die quality modifier. So I'd be rolling 1 green die. And 1 green die has a lot of misses. Plus, here, see, here's the other thing too that's a plus. Because my attack value on the truck is red, meaning it does really good against red shields, against yellow shields, I would actually have to score 2 successful hits on a mix, on colors, the secondary color against the primary color, and the green die does not have any sides with 2 positive hits. 2 shields for counterfire, but only 1. So I would need to roll at least 2 dice to possibly score 1 hit on this BMP. So this truck isn't going to shoot at the BMP. RPG, on the other hand, we have a firepower and a starburst of yellow. That means this vehicle, or this RPG shooting against armored vehicles, is designed for that. If I was to shoot at infantry, I wouldn't do so good. It would take 3 hits to do a point of damage. So if you're shooting at a target where you don't have that color, it's a big mismatch. Basically, this is specialized against armored vehicles. Well, it's an RPG. Yeah, you can shoot it at anything, but it's designed to shoot against tanks. Well, perfect. This is an armored vehicle. Not a tank, but an armored vehicle. So we have 4 firepower, 1 shield on defense. That means we're going to start with 3 dice. I'm at long range for the RPG. That means 2 of these dice convert to green. This vehicle is in the open, so there's no modifiers for defense. Let's see. What other possible... There's no tech difference, but here's something. Because I'm shooting at this vehicle, it has options. It can either stay in the hex and absorb the hit and then do something next turn. It has a chance to retreat, meaning it doesn't want to get shot, so it can leave the hex. There's some restrictions on retreating. Or it can return fire. That means it sees the RPG gunner, and so the BMP gunner swings the autocannon around, and it sees like a burst of one of the RPG shots, and it decides to return fire. Now, what that will do is return fire, counter fire, adds 1 to the attacker's dice quality. So I would actually turn this back to a black dice, and then I could attack. So we know the BMP is returning fire with the autocannon, and the RPG teams are tearing into this platoon. So we're going to roll the dice. I wonder if I can just roll them on this map. Probably not. I'm going to move and roll off to the side here. Wish the RPG team well. That's not well. This green was a miss. Well, what happens? The RPG scores 1 hit. That's 1 success. So that BMP will go from a green to a yellow because it was, it goes from green, it goes to yellow because it took 1 hit. Bum, 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 bum. Now we apply the counterfire. To determine the counterfire bonus, which we would have done before I applied the damage to this vehicle. So let's just go ahead and put the green back on there for a second. To determine how many counterfire hits you score, you're going to start by taking the firepower of the vehicle, which is 3, subtract the 1 defense, and that means I could potentially do 2 points of damage. There's also a couple of modifiers to that. And I had that in the book, but then I shut the book because I wanted to show you the modifiers. Counterfire. So you take your firepower minus the attacker's defense, minus any action dice number modifiers. So this vehicle here has a -1 for the action. So I was at 2 dice. Now the counterfire is technically dropped to 1. So that means I could potentially do 1 point of damage. Then it says -1 if the attacker has any defensive any defensive terrain. -1 if the attacker has any defensive terrain. So this is bad, and we should have looked at that for the BMP, because the BMP has firepower 3. Subtract 1 for the defense, that would be potentially 2 hits I could score. Then it says subtract for your marker, -1, so I could score potentially 1 hit. And then you subtract 1 hit if the opponent is in defensive terrain, which they are. So that means when I said I would counterfire, I should have thought that through, because he actually cannot damage the infantry with counterfire. Womp, womp, womp. What would have been best is if the guy shooting had simply said, we're going to stand and take it. Because then it would have been 1 black die and 2 green, and potentially the green dice are not so good. But as it stands, I couldn't score any counterfire hits. He got hit for 1 point, so he's going to increase to a yellow. Oh, bad choice for me starting out. Well, there's our first combat. That is a shot, so they get marked. That's an action. Now, this unit does not get marked with an action for counterfire because his penalties for counterfiring are built into the dice. So he doesn't get a step for doing a counterfire. He gets 1 step because all he did was a fire action. Machine gun won't fire. He's going to stay put. He's not going to do anything because as these folks come over the hill, I don't want them marked with any green actions preventing them from op firing. This unit here, though, that has a missile. Why don't we? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna move here. This guy. So that's cultivated ground. There's a road there, but I'm not starting my movement on road. So cultivated. Here's cultivated. Infantry is 1 movement point, and it doesn't give any protection. Oh, okay. So 1 movement point, and to move into a city is 2 movement points. So I now have a truck and infantry. And I leave the rebel on top of the truck because they're not riding in the truck. And what I can do now is mark the infantry as having done an action because they moved, and then my truck will stay unmarked. And these units here, they're not going to do anything. They're going to stay put. So I could say I'm done with my action. I draw my opaque cup, and I draw out, oh, the rebels. Rebels got back-to-back activations. Part of your administrative actions then, when it comes back around to a unit, is you remove 1 step action for free. So all the green goes away. Gone away. Gone away. And now I can start deciding what I want to do. So my RPG team is going to take another shot at this BMP. The BMP is not going to return fire. The BMP cannot retreat. When you retreat, there's actually a couple requirements. One, it says you need to be in terrain that has, I'm going to look for the wording exactly. It says available to any unit that is in a terrain that reduces the attack quality against it and is not pinned or shaken. Well, this unit is pinned and their hex does not have any dice quality modifiers for defense. So this unit can't retreat. So because what that means is, and I thought about that, I was like, well, why would that matter? Why can't you just hit reverse on the gas and back out of there? Because there's nothing to hide behind. So if I had a unit that was in the city being shot at and they wanted to retreat, they could. And then you would move back an adjacent hex, hopefully increasing your distance between you and the attacker, and preferably into cover if you could. But this guy's in the open, so that means even if he's backing up, there's no cover, people would just continue to shoot at him and he would take fire no matter what. Here in cover though, they can put the cover between them and the attacker, block line of sight, and they've retreated. So thematically, that makes sense. So here we go, we have the BMP. He can't return fire because see, now he has a -2 penalty if he was going to shoot back. But the RPG team, they're good to go. So we know already that we're going to start with 4 dice, subtract 1 for the defense. That is 3. We know that long distance is a quality reduction of 2 dice. There's no other modifiers. Pretty soon you get used to this chart. There's no tech difference. They're the same tech level. There's no retreating. We're not close range, long range, so we had our -2 dice quality modifier. The opponent is not counterfiring because they can't hurt the infantry on a counterfire. I'm not combining fire with any other units, so no extra dice for combined fire. And we're not flanking fire in from different hex sides. Now, if I wanted to, this is kind of weird. I could actually combine fire with the truck because the truck is in range and the truck would let me add 1 more die to the roll. Yeah, the only requirement is that you're in the same range band as anybody you're combining fire with. So if you have like a couple units that are close range, you could not also add in the guy at medium range. This is the same range band. But if I include the truck, he would get marked with a green and would not be able to counterfire when people come up over the hill. So we're not going to combine. So we're just going to roll 3 dice, a black and a couple greens. I'm going to try and roll it right here on camera and see what markers I can mess up. Ooh boy, that RPG tore into those BMPs. That's 3 hits, no counterfire, so we can set that aside. Ouch, 3 steps. All right, so I'm going to turn the blue, got to find a yellow marker real fast. So that yellow marker, where'd my blue markers go? Am I using one? Oh, here we go. So that blue, or the yellow, turns to a blue, so now it's a -3. That's 1 hit. Then 2 hits, flip the unit to its reduced combat side, and the final hit destroys this vehicle. Now, here's the cool thing. Because I destroyed that vehicle exactly, the infantry dismount automatically, and they're going to be at -3 because they are all types of disrupted. I had to find a rec marker. So the BMP gets blown up exactly enough to destroy it, right? Because we went from yellow to blue, 1 action, flipped it, 2nd action, 3rd action, destroy the BMP. If I had done 4 points of damage, then that would have also destroyed the infantry. But the infantry automatically deploy. It doesn't cost any action for that deployment. It just means they're jumping out of the vehicles as they're blowing up. But they do keep that -3 because that would be 1 less than a step loss. So they are hurting there. Now, oh, I have to mark the RPG team. Good shooting, team. Now, my son, when we played this, he said, "Dad, that doesn't sound fair. That RPG is firing a lot." Well, remember, I had to explain to my son, That's a platoon of infantry. They probably have more than one RPG launcher. A platoon of BMPs is usually 4 vehicles. Each squad of troops gets its own vehicle. So that's probably 4 vehicles, and that could be any number of RPGs. Plus, a turn is about 15 minutes. In 15 minutes of these folks exchanging fire and then moving around to avoid it, you could probably fire a lot of RPG rockets in 15 minutes. So this is actually a very plausible situation. That's why when you can return fire, that makes sense, because this is not a game where it's just simply I do something and then you might do something. There's the potential for simultaneous interactions. I'm returning fire at you because you're shooting at me. And what happened here was there was just too much already suppression built up that they were able to get free shots in. So the RPG teams did exactly what they're supposed to do. They hurt those BMPs. But RPGs don't do very good against infantry. So those might become wasted shots in the future as far as the RPG goes. But what are my rebels going to do? Well, look here. Now that this infantry has been deployed from the vehicles in the open and they have this suppression built up from the destroyed vehicles, my truck can shoot. Remember, this militia only has a range of 1, extended out to 2. But this truck with 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to go ahead and shoot with the truck. I think it'd be a great chance to go ahead and possibly also wipe out dismounted infantry. In a way, these two have now coordinated actions. Very cool. If I had added his attack, like I had first maybe said, it's quite possible that that extra dice he provided may have destroyed the infantry as well, but it's hard to say. So I was going to save him for opportunity fire, but we're going to go ahead and shoot with him now. So we count out, he's at extended range. He starts with 2 dice, and there's 1 defensive shield. This isn't going to be a very good dice roll, actually. Maybe I shouldn't. But he's going to start with 1 die. It's long range, so quality gets dropped. And I'm looking at my modifiers. That's about the only one. This infantry can't retreat. It can't return fire because it's got -3 penalty for how many dice it can play with. I'm not combining fire with anybody because everything else is out of range. So it's just 1 green die. If I can score 1 hit, then at least I can reduce them. They would almost be wiped out. So wiggle, 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 wiggle. Oh, look at that. Lucky. So the militia is going to get flipped to its reduced side. Truck gets a marker indicating it did an action. So we'll just do it like that. I'm going to stick that on top of the rebels. So the rebels are not mounted. It's just I'm going to stick that there to know that that green marker is just for the truck. Because the rebel militia can still shoot at maybe any infantry that come up onto this ridge. That's all we're going to do with the rebels. Now in my draw bag, I know that what was left is the Salette unit one more time. So I'm going to put that over on there, the activation track. So with the activation track, I now put that down. So Salette is going to get their action, but what you would do is you would remove all the markers except this one. These are going to go back into the draw cup. Then, after he's completed his action and we start drawing, I've got 3 markers to play with. In a way, that means somebody every other turn approximately is going to be short 1 activation. I mean, you could be lucky and my Salette unit could always be the last one in sequence to be put down, and that would make a severe disadvantage for the game. But that's the fog of war. I could draw the rebel, and I could draw another rebel like that, or I could draw the rebel, draw Salette unit, or I finished with the Salette unit, which we're about to do as activation. Then when I have to draw for the next unit, I could draw Salette again, which in a way could give you 2 activations in a row. So this is that, the random kind of situation that, kind of goes for solo play. You don't know what's coming up next. Or the fog of war, People aren't communicating very well. You know, this just represents all the misfortunes of war. Or fortune if it goes in your way. Well, we got to activate the Salette unit. So first of all, you take off all your green. Everybody recovers 1 step for free. For free. Everybody must get free. Free. Well, that wreck is going to stay there. I need to find a yellow. So they go from blue to a yellow for free. There are circumstances that will let you, if you're lucky, I'm going to see if I can find it in the book, you could recover more steps. Right here. If the unit has a defensive bonus for their position versus everyone who can shoot at them, such as improvised position, maybe in the city, you can recover a step. If you cannot be fired on by enemy units, even if you can be seen, so for example, if you're out of range, you could recover an extra step. If you're within 2 hexes of a logistics marker, which was not in this scenario, you could get a step. If the unit is defined as elite in scenario setup, you could get an extra step back. So this unit right here meets none of those requirements because not only is it in line of sight of an enemy, it's in range of their machine gun. Extended range of 2 is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So they can only recover 1 step for free. If any of these gentlemen had maybe 2 steps or 3, they could have recovered extra steps because they're out of sight of the enemy. All right, well, what are we going to do? This is very important. I'm going to move some infantry up and have them shoot. No, I can't because I can only move half my movement. Well, no, I could move. I could. Watch this. Watch this. 1, 2 movement points. That is more than half but less than full, so that's a -2 dice modifier. This unit cannot shoot at me because he has a green marker. The infantry can, however. So if you're going to do opportunity fire goes first. So you're going to op fire. They have an extended range of 2. So I take my 3 dice minus my 1 firepower. That means that infantry starts with 2 dice. It is extended range. Extended range means you drop the quality by 2. I don't have any other bonuses. This unit is moving and going to do a regular fire, so it's not counter firing. So we're just going to roll 2 dice. 2 blanks. So they opportunity fired. So what we'll do now is put them on top of the stack because they are not mounted on the truck. And we'll put that green under both of them. These are both performed in action. He can now do his firing. He's going to pick a target. He's going to shoot at the truck because the truck has no defense. It's a 0 shield and no color. That means everything hitting it does full damage. 3 firepower minus 0 shields. 2 of these dice get modified because they're at extended range with rifles. He gets it's a light urban. Light urban is truck, wheeled vehicle. Gets no defensive modifier for light urban. So I'm going to be rolling 2 green and a black. So the infantry rush up the hill. They duck and weave between being shot at by the infantry, and then they take aim on the trucks, that technical with the machine gun, and score 3 hits magically. Well, that truck is going to go from green, so it goes yellow, blue, step loss. That's 3 hits. I'm going to take a blue marker for the truck, flip it, boom. Infantry is still only green. Nice. And this guy gets marked because he did an action. Had to plug the battery, so I'm hoping that we didn't lose any footage there. Well, where were we? They fired, they did damage to the trucks there. They got marked with green. So I'd move on to the next unit for Salette. I'm moving my infantry up. And because all of these are marked with actions, he's free. No one to shoot at him. Everybody else is out of range or blocked line of sight. He's going to shoot down into the trucks as well. And it took 2 movement points to move up here because it says on the terrain chart, elevation up costs 1 plus 1 movement point. So that puts him at over half move, so it's going to have a dice roll modifier of 2. It's essentially exactly what this guy had. Well, yeah, because if you move, actually, I forgot they were in cover. I didn't give them a dice roll modifier for being in, I forgot they were in a refugee camp. That's -1 dice roll modifier. I should actually have only rolled 3 green dice instead of 2 green and a black. Should I go back and re-roll? I will, just to be fair. So actually, this rebel truck should really, he took 3. He really only should have took 1, so that means he should be on a 2. If I'm being fair, we'll be fair. But he's not going to counterfire because he's got -2 to, well, now he has, he's got -2. So he's not going to counterfire here because he's still hurt. He can't really do anything. And I'm not shooting at the rebels, so they can't counterfire. So let's see what happens to the truck. But we're going to start with 3 black dice. Let's do the math. 3 black dice because it's 3 firepower, 0 defense. I moved between more than half, less than full, so that's -2 dice qualifier. Oh, and I forgot too, this is extended range. See, I totally forgot to include the movement penalty in this guy. So because I'm in extended range, that would reduce the die quality again. But remember, you don't lose any dice. I just cannot do better than green dice. So this infantry shoots. Whoa, we scored 1 hit. Now I would flip them to blue. So that's lucky. I'm glad we really looked at that and made sure we clarified better the modifiers. So green dice can potentially do stuff, but yeah, they're really, really weak. You want to try and get bonuses up to black if you can. But now that infantry moved up and fired, they get marked with an action. I have here a truck. This truck is going to drive around at flank speed, 1, 2, because flank speed reduces movement by 1 point. That's less, he moved 2 hexes, that's less than his 10, which is all glared up for you. The infantry deploy. It costs half movement point to get out, and then to move up into clear, +1, that uses all 3 of his movement points. So he is going to have -3 on the dice quality. Well, I can tell you right now, at extended range, target is -1 for being in the fields. All of his dice are going to be green because it's 3 firepower -0 shields for the trucks. It's still 3 green dice at this point. And I rolled 1 hit. So that truck is hurting. Good thing they're not carrying infantry. And then he gets marked with green. Green. And this truck technically gets marked with green because he drove around there. Bing. I've got a BMP. BMP has 6 movement. It's only 1. I can't drive through this hex because they're already... So we're going to move out of the way. Drive. And that stat gets an action. They're just trying to keep things from being all clustered up because I'm going to drive straight down and shoot. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, look. This is the unit with a Sagger missile. Well, how would my BMP know that? Well, he probably wouldn't. But the infantry didn't say anything. So the infantry is not green. So he can do an opportunity fire. But his machine guns cannot shoot that far. So he's out of the equation. But his Sagger missile has a range of 6. And this 6 is circled red. That means he gets no bonuses for close range or extended range. He just shoots out to 6 hexes. That's it. This X next to an infantry symbol means you cannot move and fire with this weapon. So we are buckled down in a light urban hex with Sagger missiles in buildings or on top of buildings, and we're going to shoot down at this BMP. So this would be opportunity fire, so we can try and blow this up. I have a firepower of 6, so I'm going to start with 6 black dice. The BMP has a shield of 1, so I take away 1 of the black dice. I'm rolling 5. There's no range modifiers, so I don't have to reduce these to green. Are there any other modifiers? Well, the BMP is going to... Can he return fire? He has 3 firepower, and it would be normal range. He has 3 firepower. They have 1 shield. That'd be 2 dice. They're in defensive terrain, so I'd drop it to 1 die that could hit. No. They're going to return fire. But the problem is, if I return fire, that actually gives a +1 die roll modifier. That means I get to choose turn a black die to a red die. Let me see if there's any other modifiers for return fire here. Because remember, we looked at a little tiny list, and there was like 3 things that subtract from your total number of hits when you return fire. So, oh, if you had like a -1 or a -2, he's got no modifiers there. Oh, the ice cream truck is driving by. I hope you can hear that. So that means I can potentially do 1 point of damage to the infantry in that city, that light urban hex that are shooting at me. If you remember how we got there, 3 firepower, subtract 1 for the shield, -1 because they're in defensive terrain. So I'm going to do 1 shield of damage. I'm going to move the camera so we can see the dice roll without knocking all these over. And the dice, this is the dice we came up with off the Sagger missile. So there's a chance we could do a lot of damage. Well, we don't. We have here, put all the explosions together. Now every shield is a point of counterfire, but we've already determined the maximum we could do is 1 point. So luckily I rolled 6 shields. Only 1 of those counts as a point of damage on the infantry. So the infantry is going to get a green marker for his action of shooting, and then he takes 1 point of damage, which will flip the infantry to the pinned side. So I'll go ahead and mark that now. So they are pinned in the city. Then the BMP took 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, because the BMP moved, he was going to take 1 action for moving. Then he takes 1 point of combat damage. So we'll move that aside. Another point of combat damage turns that blue. Do I have any blues? Yep, blue. Another point of damage flips him from his good side to the bad side. And the 4th point of damage removes him from the board. And he gets replaced with a wreck. Wowzers. Let's look how that is on the board now. That group of Sagger missiles tore that BMP platoon to pieces. So remember, it's about 15 minutes of time when you do your activations. And in that 15 minutes, if you've got a platoon with several Saggers all set up to fire, then that's believable. I honestly don't know how long it takes to reload a Sagger missile system. I don't know if maybe my platoon just happened to have like 12 of these things laying around and they're just shooting them off as they can. But in that 15 minutes, we tore that BMP platoon up. The BMP platoon, as they come around this little sand dune, they spot infantry in the buildings, and so they start firing. All the while, the platoon starts firing off Sagger missiles and just picks those BMPs off one at a time. And that's it. BMP platoon gone. They now have a wreck of BMPs here. Well, that's enough for the Salette unit because... Oh, I had an infantry. Somehow I bumped them. They're in the wreck. yeah, that does it for the Salette unit, because I've got some trucks, but the trucks have no combat value, and they can't, they could technically drive around and try to get to the back part of the city and maybe sneak in here, but there's a lot of rebels that could shoot at them, and trucks don't have any kind of defense or weapons. So what I would want to do is use my remaining infantry to push and maybe do some damage in here. So as it stands, that would be the end of Salette's activation. Well, I would then have to take those 3 markers. It just starts a new segment. Go to the opaque cup. See, that's what's so cool about this. So my parting thoughts to you, I hope, first of all, I hope that gives you an idea of how the game plays. You activate a unit with your chit pull, decide are they moving and shooting. Combat, once you get in range, you have a little bit of a dice calculation. Once you have all your dice determined, roll and apply the combat results. Your units go through potentially 4 steps of damage. 1 for an action, which you get no matter what. That just simply signifies that the unit has to recollect themselves after a movement, put themselves into overwatch positions and whatnot, or reload ammo if they shot, any number of things. Then they go to yellow, which is pinned, 3 to shaken, 4th step is reduced in damage. And then that 5th, if they take any more of those steps, they get destroyed. They replenish 1 a step every time the unit gets activated, and they can replenish up to 3 or 4 that we read based on circumstances on the battlefield. And then you just keep drawing and reactivating units as needed. It is pretty simple. I mean, obviously, as you read through the rules, you might find some other nuances, and as you get into the later missions, there's advanced rules. But the big thing is your impulse tracker. So that was 4 activations we did. And I just got done with Salette, so I would draw my marker. And it would be rebels. What I would do then is, since it's continuing until I do 16 total activations, rebels go right here on 5. Now, if we continued the game, my next draw would have been Salette, and my next draw was going to be rebels. At that point, when the rebel finished that last activation, or as soon as you put that down, it says you pull them off. What I do is, after this, just so I remember, it's easier. Once this guy finishes his activations, then I pull everything, and then I'm ready to do another chit pull. And then we would draw another unit. Oh, I drew Salette. He goes on the 8. Then I draw another one. Oh, he goes on the 9. And then the last one in the baggie is Salette, except now he goes back on to 11. Then these 3 come off. So it's just a cycling of chits as you go through your activations. And then once you get to activation 16, you would finish that activation and determine a winner on victory points. It's not that complicated a game. So I hope that this kind of gives you an idea of the flow, gives you an idea of what it means by like a cyclic system of activations. It just keeps going. It's really, really easy. And then play, just play. Like I said, I read on Facebook some folks were excited to get the game, but they weren't really looking forward to playing it yet. I'm not really sure. But, it might take time to read. I'm not sure how complicated this is. I've been playing this now for a while in play testing, and I get a lot of the mechanics. So I would encourage you, just play the game. It's really, really not that complicated once you start working through the systems. It's actually really fun. The only thing that maybe some folks might find tedious is constantly swapping out these markers. But honestly, with a lot of games that require you to mark combat in some way, this is really easy. It's not that bad at all, because you're only swapping out a few markers at a time when you activate a unit, and it's better than having like a stack of 6 or 7 markers to represent all your steps of damage. Or plus it gives you a real sense of granularity with the damage. It's not just simply full state, flip to a broken state, destroyed. This kind of gives you a sense of stress, fatigue that you're putting on a unit, that chance that maybe on a turn, instead of moving forward, they might reposition to cover if they can. That way they could, protect themselves. It just gives you a lot of really good options, I think. So once you play it, I think you're going to like this system as well. Just let us know, right? Leave comments. Tell us what you think of the game. Tell us what you think of the components. We put a lot of effort into making sure you got some good quality pieces to play with. Big counters that are thick, that means they're easy to pick up. You don't need tweezers. I know some people like that, but for me, sometimes when I'm playing with my son, it's just easy to have a nice big piece I can pick up, move. The hexes are, a really good size. It was nice. Someone said they're going to use this map with a game called Ogre, which I was like, well, how about you play this game first? But it's a nice thick mounted board. You're not going to tear this with paper. You don't need to buy extra plexiglass. I mean, everything you need is out of the box, ready to go. So I encourage you to play it, give it a try, let us know what you think. And if you have questions about rules, please ask. We'll do what we can to answer them. We have a forum on Board Game Geek. Go there, look up Armageddon War, and we're going to start, making sure that we get to the forums and answer questions as often as possible. Also, share your pictures. If you've got unboxing pictures, send them to Pixnvids, so PICSNVIDS, Pixnvids at flyingpiggames.com, and we'll share your pictures out for you too. We'll share them out on our Facebook. We'll put them in our Twitter feed. And if we can, and you haven't done it, we'll see if we can submit them to Board Game Geek as well. We really want to share this great system that we have, and we hope you want to share it out too. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this clarifies things, and we'll talk to you later.